Before we start, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll watch this entire story, because what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change how you think about love, about choices, and about the moments that define our entire lives. Hit that like button if you're ready for a story that will stay with you long after this video ends. And please, subscribe if you believe that sometimes the most beautiful stories are also the most heartbreaking ones. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of my wedding day. From the outside, it was perfect, picture perfect actually, but inside, I was dying. Because as I walked down that aisle in my dream dress toward my dream man, all I could think about was someone else, someone I could never have, someone who was sitting in the third row watching me marry his best friend. The morning sun filtered through the gauze curtains of the bridal suite, casting everything in that golden, ethereal light that photographers dream of. I should have been glowing. I should have been radiant with joy, practically floating on air, as every bride is supposed to on her wedding day. Instead, I sat there in my silk robe, staring at my reflection in the vanity mirror, and all I could see was a lie. "Sarah, honey, you look pale," my mother said, bustling around behind me with the nervous energy of a woman who had been planning this day for 2 years. "Are you feeling all right? It's just nerves, sweetheart. Every bride gets nervous." Nervous. If only it were that simple. My wedding dress hung on the back of the door like a ghost, all ivory silk and delicate lace, with tiny pearls sewn into intricate patterns that caught the light when I moved. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. The dress, the venue, the flowers, even the groom, especially the groom. Michael was perfect, genuinely, undeniably perfect. Successful, kind, handsome in that clean-cut, all-American way that made mothers swoon and fathers nod approvingly. He loved me with the kind of steady, dependable love that romance novels call true and forever. The kind of love that builds houses and raises children and grows old gracefully on front porch swings. So why did my heart feel like it was breaking? "Let me do your makeup, sweetheart," my maid of honor, Jessica, said softly. She had been my best friend since college, and she knew me well enough to recognize the storm clouds gathering behind my eyes. "You'll feel better once you're all done up." I let her work, closing my eyes as she brushed foundation over my skin, concealer under my eyes to hide the evidence of a sleepless night. With each stroke of the brush, she was painting over the truth, creating the perfect bride that everyone expected to see. "You know," Jessica said quietly, "it's okay to be scared. Marriage is a big step." Scared, another word that didn't quite capture the earthquake happening in my chest. Through the window, I could see the garden where the ceremony would take place in just 3 hours. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an archway covered in roses and baby's breath, a red carpet that would soon be scattered with petals. It looked like something out of a fairy tale. But fairy tales don't usually feature brides who are in love with someone else. My phone buzzed on the vanity table, a text message. My heart stopped when I saw the name on the screen, David. "Thinking of you today. You deserve all the happiness in the world." David, Michael's best friend, the best man who would be standing at the altar, watching me promise my life to someone else. The man I had fallen in love with slowly, quietly, desperately over the past year, even as I planned a wedding to his closest friend. I deleted the message without responding, but my hands were shaking as I set the phone down. "Sarah?" Jessica's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you sure you're okay?" I opened my eyes and looked at my reflection. The makeup was flawless, but it couldn't hide the pain that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep inside my chest. "I'm fine," I whispered, and it was the first lie of many I would tell that day. The dress was heavier than I remembered. As my mother and Jessica helped me step into it, the weight of all that silk and expectation seemed to settle on my shoulders like a beautiful burden. Each button they fastened up my back felt like another link in a chain I wasn't sure I wanted to wear. "Oh, Sarah," my mother breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "You look absolutely stunning." I turned to face the full-length mirror, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The woman looking back at me was everything a bride should be: elegant, radiant, perfect. The dress fit like it had been made for me, which it had. The bodice hugged my waist, the skirt flowed like water, and the train spread behind me like spilled moonlight. But behind the beauty, behind the perfection, I could see the truth in my eyes. I looked like a bride, but I felt like an actress playing a role I'd never auditioned for. "The veil," Jessica said softly, lifting the delicate piece from its box. It had been my grandmother's, passed down through 3 generations of women who had worn it on the happiest days of their lives. As she placed it on my head, securing it with the vintage pearl comb, I wondered if I was breaking some kind of sacred tradition by wearing it while my heart belonged to someone else. My mother stepped back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Your father is going to cry when he sees you." The mention of my father sent another wave of guilt crashing over me. He had walked my sister down the aisle 5 years ago, beaming with pride and joy. Today, he would walk me down the same path, never knowing that every step was taking me further away from where my heart wanted to be. "I need a moment," I said suddenly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, sweetheart," my mother said, misunderstanding my need for solitude as pre-wedding jitters. "We'll give you some space to collect yourself." They left me alone in the bridal suite, and suddenly the silence was deafening. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden again. Guests were beginning to arrive, elegant figures in their wedding finery, chatting and laughing as they found their seats. I could see Michael's family, his colleagues from the law firm, and our college friends. And then I saw him. David was standing near the back of the garden, adjusting his tie with those long fingers I had memorized without meaning to. Even from this distance, even through the window, I could feel the pull of him like gravity. He looked up suddenly, as if he could sense me watching, and our eyes met across the space between us. Time stopped. In that moment, I remembered everything. The night 6 months ago when we'd found ourselves alone at Michael's birthday party, talking until dawn about books and dreams and the way the world looked different in the early morning light. The way he'd looked at me when I laughed, like I was something precious and unexpected. The almost kiss that we'd both pulled back from. The weight of loyalty and friendship and impossible timing hanging between us like a curtain we couldn't quite push aside. The way he'd said my name that night, Sarah, like it was a prayer he wasn't allowed to say. I pressed my hand against the window, and I swear I could see him take a step toward the house before catching himself, remembering where he was, what day this was, who I was about to marry. A knock at the door broke the spell. "Sarah, it's time, sweetheart." My father's voice, warm and proud, and completely unaware that his daughter's world was falling apart. I turned away from the window, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the door. Toward my future. Toward a choice I wasn't sure I could live with, but one I was about to make anyway. Because sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes duty and loyalty and the weight of everyone's expectations are stronger than the pull of your own heart. Sometimes you marry the right man for all the wrong reasons and spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to choose differently. My father's arm felt like an anchor as we stood at the back of the garden, waiting for our cue. He looked distinguished in his tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled, his eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. This was the moment he had been waiting for since the day I was born, the moment he would give his little girl away to the man who would love and protect her for the rest of her life. If only he knew that his little girl was already gone, lost somewhere between duty and desire, between what was right and what felt real. "You ready, princess?" he whispered, using the nickname he'd called me since childhood. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. The string quartet began to play Pachelbel's Canon in D, and suddenly every head in the garden turned toward us. A collective intake of breath, the rustle of fabric as everyone rose to their feet, the soft sound of someone crying, probably my Aunt Margaret, who cried at every wedding, even strangers' weddings in movies. And then we were moving. Step by step, down the red carpet that seemed to stretch for miles. Past faces I had known my whole life, family friends, college roommates, colleagues from work. Everyone was smiling, their faces glowing with happiness and love and celebration. They were witnessing what they believed was the beginning of my happily ever after. But all I could see was the altar ahead of me, where Michael stood waiting in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his face radiant with joy and love and absolute certainty. He looked like a man who had never doubted anything in his life, especially not this moment, not this choice, not me. And beside him, in an identical tuxedo, but somehow wearing it completely differently, stood David. Our eyes met again, and this time there was nowhere to hide, no window between us, no excuse to look away. He was trying to smile, trying to play the part of the happy best man, but I could see the pain in his dark eyes, the way his jaw was clenched just slightly, the almost imperceptible shake of his head that might have been meant for me or might have been meant for himself. "Don't," his eyes seemed to say. "Please don't do this." But my feet kept moving, carrying me forward with the inexorable momentum of a decision that had been made months ago, when Michael had gotten down on one knee in the restaurant where we'd had our first date, when I'd said yes because it was the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, the thing that everyone expected me to do. Halfway down the aisle, the memories hit me like a physical blow. Flashback. 3 months ago, at Michael's law firm's Christmas party. I'm standing alone on the balcony, needing air, needing space from all the congratulations and wedding planning talk. David finds me there, brings me a glass of champagne, and doesn't say anything for a long moment. "Are you happy?" he asks finally, and the question hangs in the cold December air like a challenge. "Of course I'm happy," I say automatically. "Why wouldn't I be happy?" He's quiet for so long that I finally turn to look at him. He's staring out at the city lights, his profile sharp and beautiful in the glow from the party inside. "Because," he says quietly, "you don't look happy. You look like you're drowning." And suddenly I am drowning, right there on that balcony, drowning in the truth of what he's just said, drowning in the way he's looking at me now, like he can see straight through all my careful pretenses to the scared, confused woman underneath. "David," I whisper, and his name tastes like everything I can't have. He takes a step closer, and I can smell his cologne, can see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, can feel the heat radiating from his body in the cold night air. "Sarah," he says, and my name in his voice sounds like a confession. But then the balcony door opens, and Michael appears, smiling and slightly drunk, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Come on, they're about to do the toast." And just like that, the moment shatters. David steps back, the careful mask sliding back into place, and I let Michael lead me inside, back to the party, back to the life I've chosen. But I can still feel David's eyes on me for the rest of the night. The memory faded as I realized I was almost at the altar. My father squeezed my arm gently, and I could feel his pride radiating through his touch. In just a few more steps, he would place my hand in Michael's, would give me away with his blessing and his love, and his complete faith that he was doing the right thing. Michael was beaming at me now, his blue eyes bright with love and anticipation. He mouthed, "You're beautiful," and I tried to smile back, tried to look like a woman who was about to marry the love of her life, instead of a woman who was about to make the biggest mistake of her existence. 3 more steps. 2, 1. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the officiant asked, his voice carrying clearly across the garden. "Her mother and I do," my father said, his voice strong and sure. He lifted my veil, kissed my cheek gently, and then placed my hand in Michael's. Michael's hand was warm and steady, just like everything else about him. He squeezed my fingers gently, and I could feel his excitement, his joy, his absolute certainty that this was the beginning of our perfect life together. I looked up into his face, this good man who loved me completely, and felt my heart break a little more. Standing just 3 feet away, David was watching us with the expression of a man attending a funeral instead of a wedding. And maybe, in a way, he was. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, his voice warm and ceremonial, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Michael James Harrison and Sarah Elizabeth Murray in holy matrimony." The words washed over me like water, familiar and expected, but somehow distant, as if I were hearing them from underwater. I was acutely aware of everything, the way the afternoon sun slanted through the trees, casting dancing shadows across the assembled guests, the scent of roses and jasmine heavy in the air, the way Michael's thumb was tracing gentle circles on the back of my hand, and David, always David, standing so close I could hear him breathing, could sense the tension radiating from his body like heat from a flame. "Marriage," the officiant continued, "is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God." Not lightly, the words echoed in my mind. If only he knew how heavy this moment felt, how each word was like a stone being placed on my chest. "Michael," the officiant said, turning to my soon-to-be husband, "do you take Sarah to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" Michael's voice rang out clear and strong. "I do." His eyes never left my face, and I could see everything in them: his love, his commitment, his future, our future, the house we would buy, the children we would have, the life we would build together, solid and respectable and good. "And Sarah," the officiant turned to me, and suddenly the entire world seemed to hold its breath. "Do you take Michael to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" The silence stretched out like an eternity. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, waiting for the inevitable "I do" that would seal my fate forever. I could feel Michael's hand tightening slightly on mine, could sense his confusion at my hesitation. And I could feel David's presence like a physical force, pulling at me, even as I stood at the altar promising myself to someone else. Flashback. 2 months ago, Michael's apartment. We're having dinner with David, the 3 of us, like we'd done dozens of times before. But tonight feels different. Tonight, every time David looks at me, I feel like I'm coming apart at the seams. Michael is in the kitchen, getting dessert, and David and I are alone on the couch, the silence between us charged with everything we're not saying. "This is killing me," he says suddenly, so quietly I almost don't hear him. "David, don't. No, I have to say this. I have to say it once, and then I'll never say it again." He turns to face me fully, and his eyes are desperate, pleading. "I'm in love with you, Sarah. I have been for months. And I know it's wrong. I know it's impossible. I know you're marrying my best friend in 2 months, but I can't. I can't pretend anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. Everything I've been feeling, everything I've been trying to deny, suddenly has a voice. "I know," I whisper, and his eyes widen in surprise. "You know?" "I know because I feel it too." The confession tears out of me like a sob. God help me, David. I feel it too. For a moment, we just stare at each other, the truth hanging between us like a bridge we're both afraid to cross. "What are we going to do?" he asks. Before I can answer, Michael's voice calls from the kitchen. "Sarah, do you want ice cream with your cake?" "Yes," I call back, my voice somehow steady despite the fact that my world is crumbling. David and I don't speak for the rest of the evening. We don't speak about it ever again. But now, standing at this altar, I can see that conversation in his eyes, can feel the weight of all the words we never said. "Sarah," the officiant prompted gently, and I realized I had been silent for too long. I looked at Michael, at his kind face and patient eyes, at this man who deserved so much better than a bride who was in love with someone else. I thought about backing out, about stopping the charade before it went any further. But then I saw my parents in the front row, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, my father beaming with pride. I saw Michael's family, his colleagues, and all our friends who had traveled from across the country to be here. I saw the life we had planned, the future we had mapped out, the promises we had already made to each other and to everyone who mattered to us. And I realized that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes duty and loyalty and the weight of everyone's expectations are stronger than the desires of your own heart. "I do," I said, and the words felt like a death sentence. Michael's smile was radiant, relieved, and perfect. He squeezed my hand again, and I could feel his joy radiating through his touch. "The rings," the officiant said. David stepped forward, and for a moment, his hand brushed mine as he handed Michael my wedding band. The touch was electric, lasting only a second, but burning through me like fire. Our eyes met, and I saw everything in him: love, loss, resignation, goodbye. Michael slipped the ring onto my finger, his voice strong and sure as he repeated the words the officiant gave him. "With this ring, I thee wed, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow." Then it was my turn. David handed Michael's ring, and again that brief, devastating touch. My hands were shaking as I slipped the band onto Michael's finger, my voice barely audible as I repeated the same words. "By the power vested in me by the state of California," the officiant announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Michael, you may kiss your bride." Michael's hands cupped my face gently, and he kissed me with all the love and promise of our new life together. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear my mother crying happy tears. But all I could think about was David, standing just behind Michael, watching the woman he loved kiss another man, watching his heart break in real time. As Michael and I turned to face our guests as husband and wife, I caught David's eye one last time. He was clapping, along with everyone else, smiling that careful, practiced smile, but his eyes were saying goodbye. The reception hall was transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Soft lighting cast everything in a warm, golden glow, and the tables were adorned with centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath. Crystal glasses caught the light like tiny stars, and the dance floor gleamed under the chandelier that had been my mother's one extravagant request. Everything was perfect, absolutely, undeniably perfect. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "please welcome for the first time as husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Michael Harrison." The applause was thunderous as Michael and I entered the reception hall hand in hand. He was glowing with happiness, stopping every few steps to accept congratulations and well wishes from our guests. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things, playing the part of the blissful new bride. But my eyes kept searching the crowd for David. I found him at the bar, nursing what looked like whiskey, his tie loosened slightly, his carefully composed expression starting to crack around the edges. When he saw me looking, he raised his glass in a small toast. To me, to Michael, to the happy couple. But there was something devastating in the gesture, something that made my chest tighten with grief. "Time for your first dance," Michael whispered in my ear, and suddenly we were walking onto the dance floor as the opening notes of "At Last" began to play. It had been our song from the beginning, the song that was playing the night we met at that coffee shop near campus, the song Michael had hummed while he proposed, the song that was supposed to represent the beginning of our happily ever after. Michael pulled me into his arms, and we began to move together with the easy familiarity of a couple who had danced together hundreds of times. He was a good dancer, confident and smooth, and he held me like I was something precious. "I love you, Mrs. Harrison," he murmured against my ear, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I love you too," I whispered back, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I did love Michael, just not the way a wife should love her husband. Not the way I caught sight of David over Michael's shoulder. He was still at the bar, but now he was watching us dance, his expression unguarded for just a moment. The pain in his eyes was so raw, so visible, that I almost stumbled. Michael spun me around, and when I came back to face him, he was looking at me with concern. "You okay? You seem a little distracted." "Just overwhelmed," I said, forcing a smile. "It's been such a big day." He kissed my forehead gently. "I know, but we did it. We're married. We're going to be so happy, Sarah." The song ended, and our guests applauded as Michael dipped me dramatically. I laughed, the sound coming out higher and more forced than I intended. And then we were surrounded by people wanting to congratulate us, to hug us, to share in our joy. The next hour passed in a blur of conversations and photographs and toasts. My cheeks hurt from smiling, and my feet were killing me in the designer heels my mother had insisted on. But I played my part, the radiant bride, the happy wife, the woman who had everything she could ever want. Finally, there was a lull in the festivities. Michael was across the room, deep in conversation with his law partners, and I found myself alone for the first time all day. I slipped out onto the terrace, desperate for air, for space, for a moment to breathe. The night was warm and clear, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I could hear the sounds of the reception continuing inside. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. It sounded like happiness. It sounded like a celebration. It sounded like everything I should be feeling, but wasn't. Beautiful night. I turned to find David standing in the doorway, his jacket slung over his arm, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, older somehow than he had that morning. David, his name came out as barely a whisper. He stepped onto the terrace, closing the door behind him, and suddenly we were alone together for the first time since that night on the balcony 3 months ago. "How are you holding up?" he asked, and there was something gentle in his voice, something careful. "I'm fine," I said, then caught myself. "No, that's not true. I'm not fine. I'm not fine at all." He moved closer, and I could smell his cologne, could see the exhaustion in his eyes, could feel the pull of him like gravity. "Sarah," he said, and my name in his voice sounded like a prayer. "No," I said quickly, taking a step back. "We can't. Not now, not ever." "When then?" There was desperation in his voice now, raw and painful. "When are we going to talk about what's happening between us? When are we going to acknowledge that you just married the wrong man?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true, isn't it?" He was closer now, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Tell me it's not true, Sarah. Tell me you're completely, utterly happy with the choice you made today, and I'll walk away. I'll never mention this again." I opened my mouth to say the words, to give him the lie he was asking for, but nothing came out, because I couldn't lie to him, not about this, not when he was looking at me like his heart was breaking. "I can't," I whispered, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "Then why?" His voice cracked on the word. "Why did you go through with it? Why did you marry him when you're in love with me?" "Because it's the right thing to do." The words exploded out of me, months of suppressed emotion finally finding a voice. "Because Michael is good and kind, and he loves me, and he deserves better than a wife who's in love with someone else. Because you're his best friend, and I couldn't destroy that. Because sometimes love isn't enough, David. Sometimes duty and loyalty and doing what's right for everyone else are more important than what we want." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing my words, could see the pain and understanding and resignation warring in his expression. "And what about what's right for you?" he asked quietly. "My happiness doesn't matter," I said, and realized as I said it that I believed it completely, not when it would hurt so many other people. "It matters to me," he said, and his voice was so soft, so broken, that I almost started crying right there. We stood there in the silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us like a curtain. Inside, I could hear the DJ announcing that it was time for the best man speech, could hear people calling David's name. "I should go," he said finally. "I have to give a toast to the happy couple." He started to turn away, but then stopped, looked back at me one last time. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you're wrong. I think your happiness does matter. I think it matters more than anything else in the world." And then he was gone, leaving me alone on the terrace with the stars and the sound of my own heart breaking. I stayed on the terrace for as long as I dared, trying to compose myself, trying to find the strength to go back inside and continue playing the role of the happy bride. But when I finally returned to the reception, I felt like I was walking through a dream, or maybe a nightmare. David was at the microphone, giving his best man speech. His voice was steady, warm, filled with the kind of affection that comes from years of friendship. "I've known Michael since college," he was saying, "and I can honestly say that I've never seen him as happy as he's been since Sarah came into his life. She brings out the best in him, his kindness, his humor, his capacity for love. And Michael, well, he grounds her in the best possible way. They balance each other perfectly." The guests were nodding, smiling, some dabbing at their eyes. It was a beautiful speech, heartfelt and genuine, and every word was like a knife twisting in my chest. "So please," David concluded, raising his glass, "join me in toasting Michael and Sarah. May your love story be everything you've dreamed of and more." "To Michael and Sarah," the crowd chorused, and I raised my own glass with a smile that felt like it might crack my face in half. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes bright with emotion. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "David's such a good friend." Such a good friend. If only he knew. The evening continued around me in a haze of congratulations and small talk and forced smiles. I danced with my father, with Michael's father, with various uncles and family friends. I cut the cake and threw the bouquet and did all the things that brides are supposed to do at their receptions. But through it all, I was acutely aware of David. He was playing his part too, the devoted best man, charming the guests, making sure everything ran smoothly. But I could see the strain around his eyes, could sense the careful way he was holding himself together. As the evening wound down, guests began to leave. There were more hugs, more congratulations, more promises to get together soon. My feet were killing me, and my cheeks ached from smiling. But somehow I made it through the endless parade of goodbyes. Finally, mercifully, it was just family and the wedding party left. Michael was across the room, settling the bill with the venue coordinator, and I found myself alone with David by the gift table. "Hell of a party," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Yeah," I agreed, not trusting myself to say more. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, both of us acutely aware that this might be the last time we were alone together. After tonight, everything would be different. I would be Michael's wife, and David would be, what? The best man who was in love with the bride? The friend who couldn't be trusted around the happy couple? "I should probably head out," he said finally. "Early flight tomorrow." "Where are you going?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Chicago. The firm is transferring me to the Midwest office. I'll be leaving next week." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're leaving?" "I have to," he said simply. I can't stay here and watch you build a life with him. I can't pretend that everything is normal when it's not. I can't be the best friend who's in love with his buddy's wife." "David." "It's for the best," he cut me off, "for everyone. Michael will understand, career opportunity and all that." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him not to go, wanted to beg him to stay, But what right did I have? I had made my choice. I had chosen Michael, chosen duty over desire, chosen the safe path over the one that led to David. I'm going to miss you, I whispered, and the words felt inadequate for the magnitude of what I was feeling. I'm going to miss you too, he said, more than you know. He started to walk away, and suddenly I couldn't let him go. Not like this. Not without... David, wait. He turned back, and I could see everything in his eyes. Love, pain, hope, resignation. I need to tell you something, I said, my voice barely audible. I need you to know. Sarah, don't. I need you to know that if things were different, if we had met first, if the timing had been different, if... I took a shaky breath. I would have chosen you. In a heartbeat, without question, I would have chosen you. The words hung in the air between us like a confession, like an absolution, like a goodbye. David's face crumpled for just a moment, and I saw the full weight of what we were both giving up reflected in his expression. In another life? He asked softly. In another life, I confirmed. He nodded, understanding passing between us like a current. Goodbye, Sarah, he said, and my name in his voice sounded like a benediction. Goodbye. He walked away then, and I watched him go, watched him disappear into the night, taking a piece of my heart with him. Ready to go, Mrs. Harrison? I turned to find Michael behind me, his jacket slung over his arm, his tie loosened, looking tired but happy. Ready, I said, and took his offered arm. As we walked out of the reception hall together, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirrored wall. I looked like a bride who had just had the most perfect wedding day of her life. But inside, I felt like a woman who had just said goodbye to her soulmate forever. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same coffee shop where Michael and I had our first date, staring at a letter that arrived this morning, Chicago postmark, David's handwriting. I haven't opened it yet. I'm not sure I'm ready for whatever it says. Michael and I are fine. We're building the life we planned. We bought a house in the suburbs. We're talking about starting a family. We go to dinner parties and charity events and do all the things that successful young couples do. He's a good husband, attentive and loving, and completely devoted to our marriage. But sometimes, late at night when he's sleeping beside me, I stare at the ceiling and wonder what my life would have looked like if I had been brave enough to choose differently. I wonder if David thinks about me too, in his new life in Chicago. I wonder if he's met someone else, someone who can love him without reservation, without the weight of duty and loyalty holding her back. I hope he has. He deserves that kind of love. The letter sits unopened on the table in front of me, and I realize that I have a choice to make. I can open it, read whatever David has to say, and risk reopening wounds that are just beginning to heal. Or I can leave it unopened, let sleeping dogs lie, and continue building the life I chose. Finally, I pick up the letter and tear it open. Sarah, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I wanted you to know that I'm doing okay here in Chicago. The work is challenging, the city is beautiful, and I'm slowly learning to build a life that doesn't revolve around missing you. I met someone. Her name is Elena, and she's kind and funny and completely unaware that she's helping me heal from a broken heart. It's too early to know where it might lead, but for the first time in months, I can imagine a future that doesn't hurt to think about. I wanted to tell you this because I need you to know that your sacrifice wasn't in vain. You chose Michael because you believed it was the right thing to do, and maybe it was. Maybe love isn't always about following your heart. Maybe sometimes it's about making the hard choices, the ones that hurt in the moment but serve the greater good in the long run. I hope you're happy, Sarah. I hope Michael knows how lucky he is. And I hope that someday, when enough time has passed, we can be friends again, real friends, without all the weight of what might have been hanging between us. Take care of yourself. Love always, David. P.S. I kept the program from your wedding. I know it's probably weird, but it's the only piece of that day that belongs to me. The day I watched the woman I love marry someone else, and somehow found the strength to smile and give a toast and pretend my heart wasn't breaking. I'm proud of us for that, for being strong enough to do the right thing, even when it nearly killed us. I fold the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I sit there for a long time, watching people come and go, thinking about choices and consequences and the strange ways that love can manifest itself. When I get home, Michael is in the kitchen, making dinner. He looks up when I come in, and his face lights up with the same smile he's been giving me since the day we met. "How was your day?" he asks, kissing my cheek. "Good," I say, and realize that for the first time in months, it's not entirely a lie. It was good. That night, as we're getting ready for bed, Michael catches me looking at myself in the bathroom mirror. "Penny for your thoughts," he says, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I lean back against him, solid and warm and real, and think about David's letter, about choices and sacrifice, and the different ways we can love someone. "I was just thinking," I say slowly, "about how lucky we are." "Lucky how?" "Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have built this life together, lucky to—" I pause, searching for the right words. "Lucky to have chosen each other, even when it's not easy." He tightens his arms around me, and I can see his smile in the mirror. "I choose you too," he says softly, "every day, for the rest of my life." And standing there in our bathroom, in the house we bought together, surrounded by the life we've built, I realize something important. Love isn't always about passion and butterflies and the kind of desperate longing that keeps you awake at night. Sometimes love is about choosing to stay, choosing to build something together, brick by brick, day by day, choosing to honor your commitments even when your heart is pulling you in a different direction. I loved David with a fire that burned bright and hot and impossible, but I love Michael with something steadier, something that can weather storms and build futures and last for decades. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's more than enough. Maybe that's everything. So that's my story. The story of the day I married the right man while being in love with someone else. The story of choices and consequences and the different ways we can love someone. I know what some of you are thinking, that I should have been braver, that I should have followed my heart, that I should have chosen passion over duty. And maybe you're right. Maybe in another life, in another universe, I would have made a different choice. But in this life, in this universe, I chose Michael. And 6 years later, I can honestly say that it was the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the choice my heart wanted to make, but the right one. Because sometimes love isn't about getting what you want. Sometimes it's about wanting what you have. Sometimes it's about building something beautiful and lasting with someone who chooses you back every single day. David and I, we were a beautiful what if. But Michael and I, we're a beautiful what is. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own choices and your own love story, please hit that like button. And if you want to hear more real, raw, emotional stories like this one, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been in love with someone you couldn't have? Have you ever had to choose between your heart and your duty? I read every single comment, and your stories mean the world to me. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that teach us how to love the life we've chosen. I'll see you in the next video.